Marjorie Taylor Greene, left speechless. After Jasmine Crockett accused her of crimes, live on air. She didn't shout. She didn't raise a finger. She just laid down a piece of paper, and Marjorie Taylor Greene started to fall apart. 30 seconds? That's all it took. One document, one sentence, and the most combative woman in Congress went silent on live television. The accusation wasn't vague. It wasn't political spin. It was specific, sourced, and lethal. $130,000 in campaign funds rerouted through a fake company. No address, no phone, no humans. Just a shell. Jasmine Crockett didn't blink. Marjorie Taylor Greene did. Because in that moment, streaming to hundreds of thousands, everything changed. This wasn't a debate. This wasn't a soundbite. This was a congressional ambush written in ink, filed in public record, and timed like a courtroom takedown. The chair hadn't even finished opening remarks when Crockett raised her hand. "Mr. Chairman," she said calmly, "I move to submit a file into the official record concerning possible ethics violations tied to Representative Greene." You could feel the oxygen drop in the room. Greene leaned back, smirking. She'd seen this before Dems with binders, waving paperwork like props. They never landed punches. But this was different, because the moment Crockett opened her folder, the hearing turned cold. This document outlines a wire transfer of $130,000 in campaign funds. Crockett began. To a consulting firm in Georgia known as Oakstar Strategies. She held up a copy. No employees, no listed phone number. The address leads to a closed storage unit outside Marietta. Someone in the gallery coughed. Reporters started writing fast. Crockett continued. "We called the number. It's disconnected. We submitted an information request to the Georgia Secretary of State's office. No human name is tied to the firm." Greene interrupted quick, defensive. "That's an operational vendor. We've used them before." Crockett turned her eyes to Greene for the first time. "I'm sure you have, but you haven't reported them. Not on FEC filings, not on vendor transparency reports, not once in the last 2 years." The room got quiet, too quiet. Crockett laid down a second page. This one shows a reimbursement for $18,400, labeled as Strategic Retreat Lodging. She paused. But it was a suite at the Phoenician, in Scottsdale, Arizona, 5 stars, private balcony, valet service, flight was covered by Orbit Holdings. Now, even the chair looked up. "Orbit's CEO," Crockett continued, "is under federal investigation for international wire fraud. Did you disclose this trip?" Congresswoman's silence. "You didn't?" Greene scoffed. "This is a partisan stunt." Jasmine didn't flinch. She turned the next page. May 2023. Another flight. Sedona. Paid for by donors tied to Westbridge Energy and oil lobbying firm. 2 of their executives had pending business before the environmental subcommittee, which, last I checked, you sit on. Now, Greene looked down. "You didn't disclose that one either." She wasn't yelling. She didn't need to. Her voice stayed low. Her facts stayed high. "This isn't about one flight or one invoice," she said. "It's a pattern. PAC money, shadow firms, undisclosed perks tied to policy positions." Then came the shift. March 9th, phone call transcript. "Your aide says we need it for the beach house." Greene's head snapped up. "What beach house?" someone murmured from the gallery. Crockett pulled out the transcript. $20,000. Rerouted through Freedom Rising Passee to a Florida-based LLC named Bayrise Investments. Owned by Ronald Edgerton, who is married to your husband's sister, Kendra. Greene looked stunned. Not angry, not outraged. Stunned. "I have the Florida state filing here," Crockett added, placing it on the table. "And before you suggest this was a clerical error," she said, looking directly at Greene, "I also have a copy of the bank flag notice, the initial fraud investigation, and the wire memo." The room was dead silent. Greene opened her mouth, closed it, reached for water, didn't drink. "You can call this a smear job," Crockett said, voice soft now, "but everything I've just said is documented and entered into the record." The chairman didn't say a word, because there was nothing to say. This wasn't about party lines anymore. This was about a sitting member of Congress, frozen under evidence, surrounded by cameras, and for the first time in her career, speechless. And Jasmine Crockett. She wasn't close to finished. That was the part no one in that room seemed ready for. Not the chairman, not the press, and certainly not Marjorie Taylor Greene. Because Jasmine Crockett didn't stand there for applause. She wasn't auditioning for headlines. She stood there because she had more. "Next page," she said, voice steady as steel. "July 2023. PAC funds $50,000, dispersed to a private consulting firm based in San Diego. A flicker of movement crossed Greene's face. It was faint but unmistakable. Recognition? Crockett didn't wait. We pulled the filings. The firm lists no full-time employees. Its website is a single page with no contact information. So, we reached out to the man listed as the recipient, the supposed security consultant. She glanced down at her folder. He confirmed, on record, that he's never spoken to you, never met you, never signed a contract. A murmur rippled across the back of the room. Not loud, just disbelief, stirring like a breeze before a storm. This disbursement came less than 3 weeks after a vote you cast against the Clean Water Accountability Act, a bill designed to close runoff exemptions for energy producers. Crockett paused. Her next words landed with weight. The same week you were photographed at El Encanto in Santa Barbara, sitting with Nicholas Avril, CEO of Westbridge Energy. Now, it wasn't just Greene looking nervous. Members of the committee shifted in their seats. Some leaned back, some leaned forward. Crockett nodded toward the clerk. A printout slid down the table, an image. Low resolution, but clear enough. Greene in sunglasses, sitting on a terrace beside a man holding a whiskey glass. A name tag on his chest. Nicholas A. It was posted, then deleted. But as we know, she glanced at the committee the internet never forgets. Greene's voice cracked for the first time. You don't know what you're talking about. Crockett didn't answer. She turned the page instead. This isn't conjecture. It's an evidentiary trail. Bank transfers, PAC reports, FOIA responses, real estate documents, every single page reviewed by counsel. She stepped slightly to the side, letting the clerk collect the latest stack. And we haven't even touched 2021 yet. Silence. Tense. Still. Greene reached for her water again. This time, her hand shook. I move, Crockett said firmly, that this committee expand its current oversight review to include financial disclosure, inconsistencies, and potential abuse of travel reimbursements by Representative Greene. The chairman shifted. Ms. Crockett, do you intend to submit additional documentation? Yes, sir, including transcripts, travel logs, and tax-exempt donor filings flagged by 2 independent audit firms. She didn't say which firms. She didn't need to. The implication alone was enough to send a low hum across the committee panel. Greene suddenly stood. This is a political takedown. She wasn't yelling yet, but the volume was climbing. You're dragging my name through the mud to score points with MSNBC. That's what this is. You want to be a star? Jasmine didn't move. I'm not here to perform, she said, calm as ever. I'm here because the numbers don't lie. But it seems the filings might. The room bristled. Greene's voice rose another octave. You're twisting facts. Crockett raised a single brow. Then explain the third LLC. What Atlantic East Solutions, registered in Tampa, opened 6 weeks before a vote on rental regulation reform, and less than 2 weeks after, it received 3 deposits from industry PACs totaling over $72,000. She didn't shout. She didn't blink. She just slid the registration paperwork down the table. I didn't open that, Greene said quickly. Then you should speak with the manager listed, who also happens to be your former campaign treasurer. Now she had nothing. Even the chair stopped looking at Crockett. He turned slowly toward Greene. You're not serious, Greene muttered. You're basing all this on paperwork. Crockett leaned forward just slightly. I'm basing this on records you filed, under oath, with the FEC, and for the first time. Greene didn't respond. She sat down hard, like the wind had gone out of her. But Jasmine wasn't finished. She turned to the panel. This committee has an obligation, she said, quiet but forceful. If we claim to represent the people, if we demand transparency from our agencies, we cannot exempt ourselves from scrutiny. The room was so still you could hear a pen click. Greene whispered something to a staffer. He stood and left the room without making eye contact. Crockett stepped back from the mic. Everything I've submitted today, she said, has already been backed up on secure congressional servers. Copies have been sent to both Ethics Council and the clerk's office. Then, turning to the chairman, I'll yield, for now. But the tone said something else entirely. She had more, and the room knew it. That's what made the silence so loud after Jasmine Crockett stepped back. She didn't slam her folder. She didn't grandstand. She simply paused like a surgeon, deciding whether to keep cutting. Greene stayed seated, her arms crossed, but no longer with confidence, more like armor. She didn't reach for her mic, didn't object. The people who usually would have jumped in to defend her, quiet. Looking down, checking their phones. Outside the hearing room, chaos had already begun. CNN broke into coverage. MSNBC pushed a live chyron that read, "Crockett unleashes financial evidence against Greene." Social media lit up with screenshots of the wire transfers, the PAC donations, the Florida LLC. One tweet hit 100,000 retweets in an hour. Jasmine Crockett just dismantled Marjorie Taylor Greene with 3 documents and a calm voice. This ain't politics. It's prosecution. Inside the Capitol, the tension only grew. Reporters crowded the hallway, pressing their ears to the door, whispering into phones. Aides scurried in and out, some of Greene's people gone entirely. One staffer quietly removed her nameplate from the hallway office door before anyone noticed. But inside that room, Jasmine was still. The chairman cleared his throat. "We'll break for 15 minutes. The gavel hit. Greene stood up too fast. Her chair screeched across the floor. Without saying a word, she stormed toward the side exit, her top aide scrambling to follow. As the door shut behind her, the sound echoed louder than any outburst. Jasmine didn't move. She waited. She knew what was coming. It's because when the cameras keep rolling, silence is content. The break was anything but quiet. Downstairs, Greene was pacing in a side hallway, her voice audible through the cinderblock walls. "I want names," she barked. "Who gave her this stuff? Who leaked that file?" "That's not even public." Her comms director tried to calm her. "We're drafting a response, weaponized politics, deep state, the usual." Greene cut him off. "No, I'm going on Tucker tonight. I'll control the narrative myself. But if you go live right now, I said I'm going." Meanwhile, 2 floors up, Jasmine sat in a side office with her chief of staff. The folder still rested on her lap, closed. "You didn't drop the San Diego contract," her aide said. "I know. You didn't bring up the Westbridge dinner logs either. I know. You're holding back. I'm building sequence." She sipped water. No smile, no gloating. This wasn't about personal victory. This was about rhythm. When the hearing resumed, Greene didn't come back right away. She waited behind the curtain, letting another member speak, but it didn't matter. Everyone was waiting for only 2 people, the one being accused and the one with the file. The chairman gave the floor back to Crockett. "If the committee permits," she said, "I'd like to add clarification to the timeline surrounding Representative Greene's campaign reimbursements." Greene's mic clicked on at last. "Mr. Chairman, I have not been formally charged with any violation, and I object to the framing of this session as a trial." The chairman paused. "Duly noted. Representative Crockett may proceed." Jasmine didn't look at Greene. She looked straight ahead, voice even. In 2021, Representative Greene submitted a request for campaign reimbursement linked to a strategic media appearance in Clearwater, Florida. The hotel invoice was paid in full by a third-party donor, later identified as Leonard March, CEO of Orbit Holdings. She turned to a new page. The flight was listed under campaign expenses, but the hotel was not. That omission violates FEC transparency guidelines, and the donor in question has appeared in no fewer than 3 audits related to fraudulent lobbying disclosures. Greene interrupted. "He offered the room. I didn't request it. I didn't know who paid." Crockett nodded slightly. "Exactly. And that's the issue. When you don't know who's paying, you can't ethically sit on the oversight committee." That line hit hard. Even the chairman shifted. Another page turned. Sedona, May 2023. This time, the flight was chartered by a donor connected to Westbridge Energy. 2 of their pending cases were under review by this committee. Yet, Representative Greene failed to disclose any form of gift, travel benefit, or indirect lobbying contact. She looked up. Twice is coincidence, 3 times is a pattern, 6 times is an infrastructure. Now, Greene stood. Again. "This is an ambush." Her voice cracked, less rage now, more desperation. "You can't just list names and pretend you've proven something. You're trying to destroy me because I fight the machine?" Jasmine stayed seated. "You claimed to fight the machine," she said softly, "but you flew on its jets, slept in its hotels, and voted its interests." The gallery was silent. "This isn't personal. It's institutional." She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to, because now even Greene's allies were watching differently. Less like supporters, more like witnesses. The chairman leaned forward. "Representative Crockett, are you formally requesting referral to the House Ethics Committee?" "I am," she said, and with that, a quiet wave moved through the room. Not noise, not outrage, just gravity, the kind that shifts careers. But Jasmine Crockett wasn't done yet, because beneath her file was a second folder, still unopened, still sealed, and the nation was watching. The second folder was still sealed, but it might as well have been ticking. No one said anything as Jasmine Crockett rested her hand on it, not yet opening it, just letting it sit there like a loaded question waiting for the room to breathe again. Greene had gone silent, arms crossed, shoulders tense. She hadn't sat down since the last blow landed. Now, even standing felt performative, like she was bracing for something worse. Because deep down, she knew the first file was about money. But this second one, it was about motive. Crockett took her time. "This committee has reviewed financial inconsistencies," she began, her voice quiet but direct. "But there's one more document I waited to verify before presenting." She placed the second folder on the table and opened it slowly, like revealing the final exhibit in a courtroom. "This," she said, lifting the top page, "is a draft agreement, dated February 2023, between Representative Greene and Ridge Hill Partners, a Nevada-based investment group with holdings in fossil fuels, logistics, and deregulated land development." The room froze. Not murmurs, no coughing, just pure stillness. Crockett continued. "The agreement contains explicit language tying Greene's future legislative support to favorable tax reforms benefiting Ridge Hill subsidiaries. In exchange, she would receive private equity in Horizon Aggregate Ventures, a firm connected to Ridge Hill and deeply invested in Midwest fracking operations." She paused, letting the words sink in. "The signature on this agreement matches 5 others filed with the Georgia Secretary of State." Now Greene broke her silence. "That's not my signature." Crockett didn't flinch. "An independent forensic analyst has confirmed that it is. We've included that verification in the appendix." Greene stepped forward. "This is forged. This is fabricated." Crockett looked at her calmly. "Then you'll be glad to know it's now entered into the public congressional record." The chairman didn't stop her. No objections, no procedural theatrics, because no one wanted to stand between Crockett and the truth, not anymore. "This isn't about donations," she said. "This is about influence. It's about direct financial gain in return for congressional advocacy." She tapped the agreement. "This document may not have reached execution, but the intent is clear, and in the eyes of public trust, intent matters." A soft murmur rose this time from reporters in the back. Not shock now, but confirmation. The story was no longer just a political scandal. It was an ethical unraveling. Greene tried again. "I never submitted that agreement." But the energy in the room had already shifted. Crockett turned to the chair. "I'm formally requesting that this document, along with the accompanying verification analysis, be submitted to the House Ethics Committee for immediate preliminary review." The clerk approached, collecting the folder like it was evidence from a crime scene. Greene backed up a step. "You people don't get it," she muttered, voice cracking. "You think you can tear me down because I don't play your game." She looked around, eyes darting, voice unstable. "You think I care what your consultants say, what your donors write in their columns?" But no one answered because Crockett had removed politics from the conversation. There were no labels here, just documents, names, dates, numbers, facts, and Greene had no defense for that. Across the country, the moment was already viral. Clips of Crockett's calm delivery flooded the internet. On MSNBC, a headline blared, "Crockett drops contract that ties Greene to fracking deal." Fox News tried to spin it as partisan warfare, but even their anchors looked uncomfortable on air. On Twitter, hashtags trended globally. Dash or Ridge Hill Files, Crockett delivers, Greene collapse. In coffee shops, airport lounges, and break rooms across the country, Americans watched Greene fall apart in real time and saw something they rarely do in politics: composure winning over chaos. But back in the hearing room, Jasmine Crockett hadn't moved. She waited for the clerk to return. She waited for the silence to settle. And then she delivered the line that echoed far beyond the marble walls of the Capitol. This wasn't about winning a debate. It was about reminding this chamber who we serve. Not PACs, not private equity, the people. Then she sat down, folding her hands, eyes steady. And for a moment, Marjorie Taylor Greene, one of the loudest voices in Congress, stood there, not as a warrior, not as a disruptor, but as a question mark. Because if even a fraction of what had just been read was real, it wasn't just her credibility on the line, it was her career, and maybe, just maybe, her freedom. She was no longer the loudest voice in the room. She was the quietest. Marjorie Taylor Greene stood frozen not in defiance, but in disorientation. Around her, the storm she once commanded had turned inward. No applause, no allies, no deflections loud enough to mask what just happened. Because the documents were real. The voice on the transcript was hers, and the draft agreement was now public record. For the first time in her congressional career, Greene wasn't driving the narrative. She was trapped inside one. And outside the hearing room, the fallout had already begun. Headlines moved faster than spin: Greene's fracking ties, exposed in ethics bombshell, The Washington Post. Crockett's calm, dismantling of Greene, has Washington rattled Politico. Is this the beginning of the end for MTG? The Atlantic Cable News ran live panels. On CNN, the legal analyst reviewed the Ridge Hill Agreement clause by clause, pointing out language that could trigger criminal scrutiny. On social media, the clips exploded. Jasmine Crockett sitting still, eyes locked on the chairman, voice steady. This isn't about donations, this is about influence. That sentence alone was shared over 1 million times in under 4 hours. Meanwhile, Greene's camp scrambled. Her press team issued a statement full of keywords: deep state, political witch hunt, activist vendetta. But something was missing. Her voice. She hadn't said a word since the hearing ended. Not to reporters. Not on camera. Not even to her usual allies in the right-wing echo chamber. Because when the evidence speaks for itself, silence stops being strategy. It becomes an admission. At a town hall in Macon, Georgia, a woman in a green 2022 hoodie stood up and asked a question her local GOP representative wasn't prepared for. Why isn't she denying any of it? No one answered. At another stop in Athens, an older man who donated to Greene's first congressional run told reporters, "I don't care if she's Republican. If she's lying about money, she's done." In Washington, Greene's fellow Republicans began to shift uncomfortably. Some offered vague calls for due process. Others said nothing at all. But 3 quietly reached out to committee counsel and requested access to Crockett's evidence files. Behind the scenes, a different kind of conversation had started. One GOP strategist reportedly told a donor, "If this sticks, we cut her loose, fast, because loyalty ends where liability begins." And right now, Greene was radioactive, back inside the Capitol. Jasmine Crockett was back in her office. The folder was closed. Her team was quiet, no high fives, no celebration. Just one long exhale from a staffer who muttered, "That landed harder than we thought." Jasmine didn't reply. She just looked at the messages pouring into her inbox. Emails from ethics lawyers, letters from former Hill staffers, a message from a mother in Oklahoma who wrote, "My daughter watched you. She's 14. She said you made her believe the truth still matters." Jasmine smiled faintly. Then she did something that Greene never would have done. She declined all interview requests. No victory lap, no Twitter threads, no morning show appearances, because this wasn't about fame. This was about focus. And besides, she knew the next 72 hours would write the real story. She was right. The House Ethics Committee issued a formal notice that Greene's financial disclosures were under internal review. They didn't call it an investigation, not yet. But the language was clear: significant discrepancies between filed statements and supporting documents. In short, Crockett had hit the mark, and now the system had no choice but to respond. In Greene's office, panic set in. Her chief of staff exhausted. Red-eyed was seen packing folders into boxes before noon. Her scheduler canceled 3 donor calls. Lobbyists started postponing planned events. Even Fox News didn't know what to do. They aired a muted panel, visibly uncomfortable, trying to pivot the topic to immigration while footage of Greene sitting speechless at the hearing played in a split screen. The public wasn't buying it. In a diner outside Des Moines, as 2 lifelong Republicans sat over coffee debating the clip, she looked cornered. One said, "No one looks that quiet unless they're guilty." The other replied, "At Howard University." A class watched the hearing replay in a political science seminar. The professor paused the clip as Crockett said, "This is about who we serve," and asked the class, "What do we expect of public officials when no one's watching?" A student raised her hand. "The same thing we expect when everyone is..." That was the legacy taking root now. Not just a takedown, a standard, and it all started with one folder. Because when power assumes it's immune, the quietest voice in the room can become the loudest reminder that facts still matter. And when they're spoken clearly, they echo across campuses and town halls, cafes and church basements. The words Jasmine Crockett spoke that day, calm, measured, deliberate, were still traveling. Not as partisan weapons, not as viral memes, but as proof. Proof that facts still matter. That silence under evidence speaks louder than defiance without it. And in the vacuum Greene left behind, something else filled the air: accountability. 3 days after the hearing, the House Ethics Committee confirmed they had opened a preliminary investigation into Greene's financial records and undisclosed gifts. Quiet, no cameras. But the statement was clear. Material submitted by Representative Crockett raises concerns regarding transparency and potential misuse of campaign funds. The words weren't flashy, they weren't emotional, but in political language, that was an earthquake. Greene's team issued no denial, no document, just the same loop of claims about political hit jobs and smear machines. But even among her base, cracks were showing. At a rally in Savannah, attendance dropped by nearly half. At another, in Rome, Georgia, a man in MAGA gear shouted from the back, "Why haven't you sued her if it's all fake?" Greene didn't answer, because filing lawsuits means risking depositions, and depositions mean speaking under oath. Inside her office, aides rotated daily. Morale was gone. Half the staff were brushing up their resumes, donors silent, PACs quietly rerouting support. What had once been Greene's greatest weapon volume had become her greatest liability. Because the louder she yelled now, the more it reminded people of what Crockett did. She never yelled, she never mocked, she simply showed the receipts, and that difference had become impossible to ignore. Meanwhile, Jasmine Crockett didn't spend a single minute on a press tour. She declined every national interview. She returned to her district, met with housing advocates, hosted a community forum on senior health care. She hadn't taken down Greene for fame. She had done it because it needed to be done. Still, the requests kept coming. CNN wanted a primetime sit-down. The New York Times offered a profile. Late-night hosts begged for a walk-on cameo. She turned them all down. But she made one exception. A local journalist from Dallas, someone she'd spoken to before the election, asked for 10 minutes. Jasmine said yes. The interview was quiet, taped in her district office. No makeup crew, no lights, just a desk, a mic, and a question. "Did you know it would hit this hard?" Jasmine paused. "I knew the evidence was real. I didn't know how rare that still is." "Were you trying to end her career?" She shook her head. "I was trying to remind people what this job is supposed to be." The clip went viral anyway, not because it was sensational, but because it wasn't. It was human, honest. The kind of answer that didn't dodge, the kind of tone that didn't tremble. And for millions watching, it felt like something politics had forgotten. A grown-up in the room. That's what voters kept saying in letters, emails, calls, comments. She didn't take the bait, she didn't scream back, she brought facts to a fight and still won. By the end of the week, Greene was no longer the story. Jasmine was, but she didn't want that. So she went back to work. She filed new legislation on campaign transparency. She asked to join a subcommittee on ethics reform. And every time someone tried to drag her into a media war, she repeated the same line, "I'm not here to trend. I'm here to tell the truth." But the truth had already done what truth does best when handled with discipline. It changed the narrative. It shifted the culture. Young women especially, black women, wrote to her from across the country. "I saw myself in that seat. You proved that poise is power. You gave me a new definition of strong." And in Greene's absence from cable news, her former defenders began pivoting. Some claimed they had always warned she was reckless. Others downplayed their previous support. But none could explain away the documents. None could disprove the timelines. None could rewrite what the camera caught. A woman with a folder, a mic that stayed live, and a country that finally stopped scrolling and started listening. Months later, when the Ethics Committee issued its findings detailing multiple breaches of campaign finance protocols and failure to disclose gifts tied to private interest, Greene's political future didn't collapse in a single moment. It unraveled in quiet. Crockett didn't gloat. She didn't post a victory message. She issued a single statement. Accountability doesn't require applause. It requires consistency. That was the note she left it on. Not scandal, not celebration. Responsibility? Because in the end, this wasn't just a takedown of a political figure. It was a reminder that truth still has a pulse, that silence can be louder than spin, and that when facts are laid bare with courage, with calm, and with clarity, no smear campaign can outshout them. This wasn't about Democrats or Republicans. This was about who we let speak for us. And for once, someone spoke without fear. That's why it landed. That's why it mattered. And that's why no one watching will ever forget the moment Marjorie Taylor Greene was left speechless. Not by a scandal, but by the truth.